Now recording.
Podcast. I am Shogun. Today we're doing one of our formal moderated debate series. I will be debating Dex. I believe this is the third time that me and Young the Dex have debated, maybe even more, but they've all been a lot of fun. Today's topic is Islamic immigration. So the question is, for a non-Muslim country, should you allow Muslim people who are committed to Islam to immigrate into your country? I will be arguing that no, you should not. And Dex will be arguing that yes, you should. So this should be very interesting. Before we get into it, we are the Roundtable Discord server. You can easily find us just by Googling Roundtable Discord. You can go to Disboard and find us through politics or conspiracy theories. You can also find us on BitChute, Parler, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Minecraft, and many other places where you may Instagram. So connect with us also on social media, but make no mistake, the Roundtable server is where the magic happens. You don't want to miss daily special events on that we're doing here. So that being said, how are you, the Dex? Thank you for agreeing to be my debate partner.
Hey, I demand to speak to Shogun right fucking now. Where is he?
Okay, get it out of your way, big dog. What do you want to do? Throw me down the stairs with one hand? Hey, what do you got to say? Got the mic. What do you want to do with it?
Yo, I missed you, buddy. Where you been?
I missed you too, bro. I had to go on a very bizarre and wonderful and difficult adventure that I'll tell you about later. But for now, we're doing a debate, so let's allow it to proceed.
Oh, sorry, bro.
I was asking Dex.
Continue, sorry.
That's okay. No, it's good to see you too, man. I miss you too. And I'll throw you down the stairs by one hand, since you didn't say it to me this time. This is an old inside joke between the two of us. Anyways,
Who's gonna go first?
Well, where the hell did the Dex go? I thought he was my debate partner.
I'm right here.
He's SirDexter.
Okay, so you're there. I'm asking you, how are you doing?
I'm doing great right now. How about you?
I'm doing great too. So you would prefer that I go first, correct? So you want me to argue why Islamic immigration should not be allowed to non-Islamic countries, and then you're going to counter my point, right? So I'm going to go first.
Yes, I thought it was in the context of the U.S., but we can expand the context for sure.
It can be in the context of the U.S. It applies equally to any non-Islamic country. So that sounds great. Okay, so Paulie is going to be the moderator. So and nobody else is allowed to speak until after we do our 3 rounds. And there's going to be 2 votes at the end of that. One is you vote who do you think did better on the debate. The second, which of the 2 opinions do you agree with. And the third, did the debate change your mind? So there'll be 3 straw polls that you're encouraged to answer afterwards. And there'll be open discussion after, so you can either comment on the debates, comment on the debaters, or on the topic, and we can continue. And just a reminder, we have to be very respectful at all times. Obviously, no slurs, no racism permitted in any way, shape, or form ever on the server. So that's just a basic reminder, not for my partner, but just for anybody else. Close your mic, and we shall begin. So, Paulie, just let me know when I may begin my time. I'm just pouring my little coffee here.
I'm ready to go now, so if you start talking, I'll start your time.
Okay, give me 1 second to sit down here.
You ready?
Okay, so when I begin speaking, you may begin my time, so...
Here we go.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining and attending this debate series. I won't keep my mic open in case it distracts at all from the event, but I'm going to focus on the ideas here. So it's my video chat. But the point is, I am arguing that if you are a non-Muslim country, such as Canada and New Zealand or America, right, you're a country that is not explicitly in its orientation inclined to try and be an Islamic country. Because I want to note there are many Islamic countries in the world, right? There's Turkey, there's Saudi Arabia, there's United Arab Emirates, there's Palestine, there's Afghanistan, there's Pakistan. There are many, many countries where Islam is the rule of law, right? So if you wanted to live under a country where Islam was the rule of law, you would have many, many choices where you could go. And I think that's adequate and that's good. It means people can choose to go live under an Islamic country if they want to. If they want to live that way, they have plenty of option to do so. So the question we're talking about today is, given that Muslims have many, many Muslim countries they can choose from to live in, should we allow Muslims to immigrate? And when I say Muslims, I mean adherents of Islam. Should we allow adherents of Islam to immigrate to countries like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, or America that are not in orientation trying to become Islamicized? The answer is no, for fairly obvious reasons. Now, am I anti-immigration? Absolutely not. I come from one of, not, if not the most diverse city on earth. We have people from every country on earth.
We lost you there, Shogun. I paused your time.
With other cultures. However, if you're going to immigrate people, you can do so on various criteria. I would argue we should be inviting people on humanitarian grounds who are going to be tortured or killed for unjust reasons in their home country. We should be bringing people in as refugees, and we should bring in people over meritocratically based on the skill sets and the knowledge and qualities they bring forward. If they're scientists or doctors or PhDs, highly educated, etc., willing to serve in our military or something like this. So we want a meritocratic or a humanitarian system of immigration. Neither of these systems would lead us to immigrate Islamic immigration. So let's say that we had a need to immigrate 1,000 people a year because they would fill a void in the labor force or whatever. We have a choice. Do we immigrate 1,000 secularists, 1,000 secular humanists who share our liberal political values? Do we immigrate people who believe in freedom and justice and equality and freedom of speech that match American values? Well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? If we have a culture that we want to maintain, and if we have cultural values that we share, why wouldn't you choose immigrants who share those values? Obviously, doing so will strengthen those values in your country. Choosing to immigrate people who are hostile to those values will weaken those values in your country and slowly change your country away from the kind of country that you wish it to be. Now, this becomes more serious. You need to understand what is a Muslim and what is Islam. So a Muslim is simply an adherent of Islam. They're born into the religion. They're not allowed to leave because that would be called apostasy. So they have no freedom in this. They're declared Muslims as babies. They don't get a choice. And then if they leave, they're actually killed by all 5 schools of Islamic jurisprudence. So this is one thing I try to point out. I am anti-Islam because I am pro-Muslim. I love Muslims. Muslims are wonderful people. They are victims of a system called Islam. So we actually need to oppose Islam, not against Muslims, but for Muslims, because Muslims are overwhelmingly the primary victims of Islam. They're the ones who suffer male genital mutilation as a result of Islam. They're the ones whose entire lives is rigidly controlled by Islam. And who are sometimes motivated to engage in acts of jihad. Sorry?
1 minute.
Okay, so I have 1 minute remaining. So I'm just simply saying, I'm not saying anti-immigration, let's immigrate, but let's immigrate people who are qualified, who are meritocratically competent and capable, who have humanitarian need, and who have values and social values and cultural values that are compatible with the ones that we want. We do not want Sharia law. We do not want to execute homosexuals. We do not want to mutilate thieves. We do not want to execute adulterers. We don't want to beat our wives, right? And we don't want to have sex with children. And therefore, we don't want to base our lives on the Quran because all of these things teach this, as well as first cousin incest, etc. So we don't want to immigrate people who are committed to a system of values that will be harmful to our society, when we can immigrate people instead who would be beneficial to our society. And I'll yield the rest of my time there.
Are you done?
If I say I yield the rest of my time, it means that I'm passing it to my opponent. Yeah.
Okay, Dex, how you doing today?
I am doing pretty good. Just give me a few seconds to set up everything. Okay, ready to start.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to start now. So, first, I would like to thank and welcome back Shogun. What a better way to welcome someone back than with a debate. That being said, I would like to thank not only my debate partner, but also the server for even hosting this event. And I would implore all of you to go on the Twitch that the debate is being streamed on because it supports the server as a whole. Now, before I say anything else, the structure of my argumentation will be to bolster up my position. And then if I do have time to address points drawn up by my opposition, I will. And furthermore, I would like to apologize for any coughing that I may have. That being said, I would like to go into my position, which is we should not arbitrarily ban the Islamic religion from entering a country that was made in the face of religious persecution. See, personally, I hate open borders, and I believe that we should strongly regulate our borders as well as our immigration. I believe that the best, brightest, and needed immigrants should be the only ones that enter our country. However, arbitrary regulations like this only get in the way. You see, Muslim immigration comes with all the benefits that immigration would give us without causing any real problems. See, when you look at states that took in the most amount of Muslim immigrants, such as New Jersey, New York, Texas, and California, and my beautiful home state of Minnesota, you do not see any rise in crime rates at all. And so sources 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 shows that there has been no overall rise in crime in any of these states. Now, the only rise in crime that has been very minute has been rape. But as source 8, 9, 11, and somewhat 10 shows that this rape increases on college campuses, and it is because of increased victim encouragement to come out in the Me Too movement. The only general crime increase was in Arkansas, but that was because of other factors. Source 4 and 16 go into this even more. But not only does Muslim immigration not affect crime in any way, but they have good cultural values. Muslim immigrants are 20% more likely to be married, which can have multiple benefits for our society. But not only that, but they believe in hard work and act it out. They are 10% more likely to believe that hard work can get you places than the average American, and are also 10% more likely to be searching for the job while unemployed. Source 12 and 15 show this. But not only are they more family oriented and hard workers, but they are also Americans. Polling data shows that 82% feel like they have things in common with the general population, 76% feel strongly tied to the community, and 93% are proud of being Americans. See, it doesn't make sense to me that a young man who worked hard for all of his life and hell got a PhD against all odds was told no to immigrate to the US on the basis of his religion. I believe that we should take in hard workers, people that will improve our society. But this type of regulation says no to that. It says no to the person who can make the iPhone 13 and no to the person that can make a possible cure to AIDS. It says no to the best, brightest, and needed immigrants to our society. Now that I did get through my opening statement, I do want to address a few of his issues. I mean, not a few of his issues, but a few of his arguments. So number one, if you want to live under a country with Islamic rule, you can go there. Well, this is not really a point to the conversation, because when we're looking at implementing policy, what we want to do is benefit our citizens. And saying no to a PhD holder, saying no to someone who's going to work very hard to our country doesn't benefit Americans. In fact, it hurts them, and it has an opportunity cost. We could have been more beneficial with these immigrants in our borders. Now, he said on humanitarian grounds he allows immigration, but in China, Uyghur Muslims are being genocided. So the thing is, even on humanitarian grounds, like the wars that are happening in the Middle East, we should be able to take in these Muslim immigrants because they need safety, they need help. Now, and meritocracy. Now, why are we, if we're really appealing to this meritocratic value, why are we saying no to possible Muslim immigrants who could outperform other types of religious immigrants just on the basis of their religion? See, now, I do agree with him. We need to take in people who believe in freedom and peace. We need to maintain our culture. This is why we should take in Muslims from Albania and Bosnia who have higher human rights scores than the US, who believe in a more significant degree of freedom than the US does. Now, in this whole I'm pro-Muslim but anti-Islam, if you really appeal to this value, would you not want Muslims in here? Would you not want a woman that might have been in a Middle Eastern country to have the freedoms of that America does? Now, and with the rest of that, I would like to give the rest of my time.
Just let me know when I can begin, Paulie.
You just give me 2 seconds. I am ready now. Go ahead, Shogun.
Just let me take a rip here. Okay, so thank you, the Dex, for that interesting round. So now I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on why I believe that allowing Islamic immigration into non-Islamic countries is harmful to the health of the host country. So essentially, you need to remind yourself of what is Islam. Well, Islam is an ideology, and it's a political ideology. It's not just a religious ideology. It's a totalizing ideology. It controls every aspect of life, from diet to behavior to marriage to belief, etc. And so this ideology, unfortunately, is incompatible with our civilizational project and is in fact hostile to our civilizational project. So Islam divides the world into the Dar al-Islam, meaning the house of Islam, or the house of peace, and the Dar al-Harb, meaning the house of war. So according to Islam itself, there is a condition of eternal war in principle until the entire world has been converted to Islam, which is why it says in the Bible, fight them until religion is for none but Allah. So what this means is that Islam, by definition, by theology, is not compatible with coexistence. It has an inherent project to Islamicize the entire world, because they believe that that's their destiny or whatever. So if you immigrate people to your country who are possessed of an ideology that's hostile to your culture, this is essentially like immigrating enemies of your culture, and this is going to weaken your culture from the inside out. And you have to be particularly careful about this because you live in a democracy where each citizen gets a vote, and each Muslim family has an average of like 5 children. They breed much more heavily than like indigenous people of these countries, and they also immigrate their families from overseas. So when you start allowing Muslim immigration, it tends to lead to large Muslim families growing and Muslim families immigrating. Well, each of these people gets a vote, which means that in a democratic culture, it's only a matter of time until you immigrate enough Muslims that they start voting Islamic laws into power. And the problem with Islam is threefold. One, Islam is based on the Quran. You need to understand this. And all Muslims believe in the Quran. So this is not an issue of radical Islam. This is mainstream Islam, because mainstream Islam teaches that you have to follow the Quran and you have to do everything it says. It's not optional. It comes directly from Allah. Well, the Quran says that you should beat your wife. This is a problem because in our culture, we don't believe in domestic abuse. We don't believe men should beat their wives. But Muslims believe that they should beat their wives because the Quran says they should beat their wives. And I guarantee you, if you allow them to immigrate into our culture, they will continue to practice that, because this is in the Sharia. This is in Sharia, and this is in the Quran, which is their sacred book from God himself. So they're not really going to be concerned by the law that says don't beat your wife in this country. They're going to be concerned by the divine law that says beat your wife. And at the same token, right, Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 years old and had sex with her when she was 9. And so child marriages are also common in many Islamic cultures, but our culture doesn't support child marriages, right? But they believe that anything Muhammad does was perfect and beyond reproach. So we don't really want to immigrate people who want child marriages. That's what we call pedophilia, right? Like to have marriage or sex with like a child. We don't want that. That doesn't match our culture. Domestic violence doesn't match our culture. Being forced into a religion at birth and then murdered, which is the punishment for apostasy or leaving the religion, that doesn't match our culture. We believe in no compulsion in religion. We believe you should be able to convert or deconvert from any religion, but Islam doesn't permit that. So these are all examples, right? We don't believe homosexuals should be killed, but the Sharia law teaches that homosexuals should be killed, and this is binding on Muslims. We don't want adulteresses to be killed. If you have sex outside of marriage, we don't think you should be stoned to death, but Muslims do think this. And this goes on, right? If you're a thief, we don't think you should get your hand cut off, but Muslims think that. If you criticize Islam, we don't think you should be crucified, but Islam thinks that. So we do not want to immigrate a group of people who wants to literally bring back crucifixion and cut the hands off thieves and stone adulteresses and fornicators to death and believe in a jihad system until the world is all for Islam, and who are trying to impose submission taxes and jizyas on non-Christians. This is just, it makes no sense to immigrate this kind of ideology into your culture. Immigrate people into your culture. Don't immigrate this particular toxic and hostile ideology. And I'll yield my time.
Okay, Dex, so you're ready for round two, my friend?
Just give me 30 seconds, please.
Sure.
I think I'm ready if my cough lets me. Okay. So we can go into theology. We can go by definition, it's not okay with diversity, but clearly they don't act on this, right? Like I said before, we see no rise in crimes. We see no rise in hate crimes. We see no rise in this domestic abuse. And we can claim all day, well, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, right? But this is not inherent of like Muslim actions, right? This is just, we simply don't see this. And if we're going to go on this point that it's going to weaken our democracy, there is examples of Muslim countries with 50% and more of a Muslim population, such as Albania and Bosnia. And you do not see Sharia law. You do not see this common practice of pedophilia. You do not see a extremely large domestic abuse compared to America. You just don't see this. And this even adds more evidence to the fact that even Muslim majority countries, and I'm not even advocating for that, can have even more human rights than the US does. Now, the thing is, with this whole point, right? So the thing is, this whole Sharia law believes homosexuals should be killed. Well, the thing is, the initial immigrants of Muslims are actually more accepting of homosexuality than evangelical Christians. Second wave and third wave Muslims are much more accepting of homosexual marriage than the general population is, let alone they are more accepting of it of Christians. So the thing is, if we truly are scared for our fellow homosexual friends or family or whatever, then we shouldn't be cool with Christians coming into our lands. Now the thing is, I agree, we need to have people with our culture. I absolutely agree with that, and we should regulate it on such. We should be, do you believe in freedom? Do you believe in democracy, and et cetera, so on, right? But that's the standard of regulation we should have, not asking them if they're simply Muslim, because we can see Muslim countries in which they believe in freedom. We can see Muslim people who believe in basic human rights. So the question we must ask our immigrants when they come in is not whether they are Muslim, is not whether they are Christian, is not whether they are Jewish. We need to ask them, do you believe the values that America holds? And I totally agree with this. We should only let people who agree with our values. And clearly, Muslims do. I'm going to yield the rest of my time.
Okay, so this will be my last round here.
Yes, sir.
Right.
I'm ready when you are, dude.
Okay. So I just want to answer that, right? So Islam is a certain set of things, and it's not as flexible or as open to interpretation as people think it is, because it comes entirely from the Quran, and Islam believes that the Quran is unchanged and unaltered and perfect, and it was only written by one person, and he received it directly from the Archangel Jibril or Gabriel, and through that directly from God himself. Therefore, the Quran is written by God himself. Therefore, every Muslim, right? What is a Muslim? Well, by definition, a Muslim is someone who believes in Islam. What does it mean to believe in Islam? It means by definition that you believe that the Quran is the word of God and it's binding on all Muslims. What does the Quran say? It says you should kill your family members if they become apostates and they leave the religion. So if you believe in Islam, you believe you should kill your family members if they leave Islam. If they were, for example, convert to Christianity, you would believe that you should kill your family, or at the very least shun them. This is a problem, right? This is incompatible with our culture. The Quran says beat your wife, right? It says domestic violence is not just optional; it's actually basically mandatory on all Muslims. We don't believe in wife beating, so we don't want to import people who have an ideology that says they should beat their wives. Islam is extensively concerned, and the Quran is extensively concerned with the situations under which you can take slaves, including sex slaves. You can sell slaves, right? Muhammad was a man who owned black slaves. He was a white man who owned black slaves and sold slaves, and he created a massive Islamic slave trade. Now, the problem is those slave trades, Islamic slave trades, still exist in the world because they believe that anything done by the seal of the Prophet is beyond dispute. So Islam has both created a massive slave trade in the past and has created new slave trades in the future, because the Quran is very explicit that you can have slaves, including sex slaves. Well, we don't believe in this, right? And the Quran also advocates or enables activity that we would call rape, and taking like war sex slaves. These are not compatible with our values, right? Killing homosexuals is not compatible with our values. I was part of a large mainstream Islamic server, and I asked them, I said, am I correct in interpreting this hadith and saying that you guys would actually favor crucifying me if you could? And they said, yes, according to the Sharia law, your punishment would be crucifixion. And what was my crime? Well, it was simply criticizing Muhammad and Islam. So under Sharia law, a person like me would actually be crucified in the public square. Does this sound like something we want? Does this sound like a direction we want our society to go in, where we have crucifixion, where we cut the hands off thieves, where we kill adulteresses and homosexuals, where we marry underage and respect to an 18-year-old age of consent, where we, beat our wives routinely because the Quran says that we should? No, we don't want any of these things, right? So if we're going to immigrate people, we're not excluding you based on your ethnicity. We're not excluding you because you're an Arab. And we're excluding you because if you profess a belief in Islam, you're professing a belief in Sharia law. If you profess a belief in Sharia law, you're professing a belief in murder, in torture, and in rape. And we don't support these things. And we don't support child marriage. We don't believe that you can marry someone under 18 if you're over 18, etc. Nor should we. So we should simply limit our pool of immigration to the wide pool of qualified, meritocratic, educated candidates who are not committed to an ideology that is literally at variance with ours, right? We believe in equality. We believe in diversity. We believe in safety for everybody. We believe in freedom for everybody. And in a democratic system, it's inevitable that as this population grows through immigration and through large family birth, they will become a more and more powerful voting bloc, and they will use that voting bloc to enforce aspects of Islam, including Sharia law, democratically. This is extremely dangerous. So if you want to avoid being voted into Sharia law, you better make sure you don't allow too many Muslims to immigrate.
Right.
And there's Christians who are being persecuted who could be brought here. There's secular humanists who could be brought here. There's Sikhs who could be brought here. There's any variety of other religions. So we can still bring the same number of people. We can still bring people of quality, and we can still bring people of need. But we're not going to bring people who explicitly declare themselves to be at war with us. I'm not sure if you know this, but Islam explicitly declares itself to be at war with the entire non-Islamic world. So you literally would be immigrating people who are your avowed enemies, who literally refer to your culture as the great Satan, and who are literally determined to Islamicize the entire world at cost. This would be inviting your open enemies into your country. This is foolishness, and I'll yield my time.
All right, Dex, this is your final round, my friend.
Sure thing. Let me just get my timer set up. Okay, I'm running 3, 2, 1. Now, the thing is, Islam is a set of certain things. Well, just like any other religion, you can have many interpretations of it. I mean, look at Christians, for example. There's like numerous amount of sects. The same is true with Islam, right? And the Quran says that we should kill our family members. And even if this is true, Muslims don't do this. You don't see in Albania, in Bosnia, tons of Muslims just going around and hacking at their families. You don't see this in the states like my beautiful home state of Minnesota, California, Texas, Arkansas. You don't see all these Muslims going out and killing people. Now we can go all day and say, well, it says this, it says this. Muslims simply don't do this. And the thing is, I agree, we don't believe in wife beating, right? We don't believe in killing gay people. We don't believe that we should kill people who don't believe in Islam. Muslims don't either. If we look at the Muslims that immigrated to our country, again, there is no rise in crime. There is no rise in like Christians who like don't believe that are being killed. I mean, I literally have like tons of friends who are Muslim, and they're even chill with me, even knowing that not only am I Christian, but I'm also gay. See, the thing is, you have good points in all of what you're saying, right? We should never allow people who believe in these things. The simple thing about that is that we don't observe them acting these out. We don't observe them actually believing these things. I mean, again, we can look at Albania and Bosnia who have higher human rights scores. So and it gets to the point where, why are we excluding possible PhD holders? Why are we excluding people who could innovate for us? Why are we excluding hard workers from our society when their population is simply not a threat? I mean, we have example after example of Muslim like majority countries that like are progressively not only getting higher human rights scores, but have higher human rights scores in the US. We have examples of Muslims who have successfully integrated, and not only are their children like as much for gay marriage, as much accepting of homosexuals, but also more accepting than not only the general population, but the Christian population. So I really do want to rest my case, and I want to tell everyone in this room, look at how Muslims actually act. And when you do that, you see they are just as loving. They are just as nice. They believe in all the same values we do believe. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to open discussion.
So if somebody could now, thank you, create the three straw polls. One would just say Dex and Shogun as the two options to indicate who they think did better on the debate. The second would be, pro-Islamic immigration, anti-Islamic immigration, so people can vote on which position they agree with. And if you guys want, you can make a third one to say, did this debate change your mind? Because that's been suggested before. I would like to take a brief reply before we open it up to general discussions, even though this concludes the end of the formal debate. You said Muslims don't do this, and you said, okay, so Islamic law says that if you're an apostate, you have to be killed, right? And Islam doesn't do that. Well, actually, recently there was a case where a man in the UK lit his teenage daughter on fire because he heard her talking to her friend about becoming a Christian. So he burned his daughter alive. She survived, thank God. But the shit does happen, dude. Islam does, in fact, enforce itself in these countries, and it is horrific. These people literally get killed by their own families. There's so to say this shit is not happening, it's not true. You need to look at the Rotterdam rape scandal. There's been mass institutionalized Islamic-led sex gangs, sex trafficking gangs, pedophilia gangs in the UK. In Europe, there have been people assaulted and attacked and raped by Islamic immigrants, including children. There has been cases where men have been immigrating with their underage wives, and then the state's been approving these pedophilic marriages because of Islam. So bringing Islam, it really is leading to these problems, because Islam is not a religion for people who just like give lip service. They believe that the Quran is written by Allah, so they believe that it's binding, and they will either try to reform the society to enforce it, or they'll enforce it in their own communities. Sharia law councils do exist. Sharia law and no-go zones do exist, where Sharia law is enforced in non-Sharia countries. And there's over 18 countries where Sharia law is in place, and in those places, homosexuals are executed, apostates are executed. We can't risk letting there be more of these countries, because these countries are inherently creating human rights violations.
But the thing is, when we look at the thing is, you're really conflating what you're conflating two things here. You're conflating the religion, and you're conflating the amount of economic success a country has, right? So when we look at developed countries such as Albania and Bosnia, we simply do not see the Sharia law. We simply do not see all these gangs that you're talking about. And the thing is, in the US, where we responsibly taken in immigrants, we don't see any increase in crime. We don't see any significant increase in crime at all. So the thing is, you really have to look at it when we responsibly take in these immigrants. Are they doing what's up? And the thing is, we could restrict immigration from Saudi Arabia and that places, and give it only have immigration from places like Albania and Bosnia, where they have higher human rights scores than the US does, when they have higher freedom than the U.S. does, even though both of those have a higher than 50 percentage points of not 50 percentage points, but have a higher concentration of 50% of Muslims. Most of their people are Muslims. So the thing is, you just simply don't see this in developed countries at all. So
I disagree. I think you see massive social problems created by Islamic immigration. There's also massive health problems. For example, in the UK, Pakistani Muslims make up like 1% of the population. They make up like well over 30% of the hospital resource use. Why is that? Well, in Islam, first cousin marriage is normative. So it's actually preferred that you marry your first cousin. Why is this the case? Because Muhammad did it, and everything that Muhammad did is binding. So more than 50% of Muslim marriages are consanguineous. Consanguineous is another word for incestuous. First cousin marriage is too close. It's an incestuous relationship. It has very negative effects on the gene pool. So even though Pakistani Muslims make up like 1% of the population, they make up like 30% of the birth defects in the UK. These are countries that have socialized medicine, so this is an enormous burden on the social system. And they're literally having very high rates of birth defects and other problems, lower average IQ by like 1 or 2 standard distributions because of this widespread incest. So if you bring them in to a country like Canada that has free healthcare, then you're going to be burdening your healthcare system with a bunch of unhealthy children created through incest, which is created through a religious devotion to the example of Muhammad. So the point is, when you're considering who you want to immigrate, you know, the values and the ideology of the immigrator, as well as, you know, risks and rewards of that person coming in, these are fully valid considerations, right? So all you need to do if you're a Muslim and you want to become an American is make a short video statement saying you renounce Islam and you commit yourself to the Western humanistic or Christian, Judeo-Christian values of our country. Then you can come in and you'll be given protection from these people who want to kill you for apostasy. But if you come in and you say, yeah, I believe in the Quran and I'm committed to Islam, that basically means you're admitting to having a belief system that's incompatible with our law. You're basically part of a criminal organization because beating your wife is illegal, marrying a child is illegal, taking a slave is illegal. So you're saying you're committed to a book that's telling you that doing illegal things is okay. That's a fully valid reason to disqualify someone from immigrating to society. I mean, they're basically part of a criminal organization.
I mean, but the thing is, we simply don't see this happen in America. I mean, we can go on and say, well, it says it's in the Quran, it says that in the Quran. But the thing is, like, if you look at crime rates in the U.S., they haven't went up. In the places that you have, like, the most Muslim immigration, they haven't went up. When you look at countries like Albania and Bosnia, who have the 50% of their population is Muslim, you don't see this high crime rate. You don't see the Sharia law or whatever. You just simply don't see this. So then you have to reevaluate how you look at immigration. By the way, I would suggest that everyone go to the record event, vote in the straw poll about all the polls, like who changed their mind or like should immigration be allowed and who did. But yeah.
So both of you guys are painting, I think, with way too broad of a brush. I am personally for open immigration, of allowing people who you don't have any proof that they're not peaceful as an individual against that particular person, then they should be able to come in. But I think that the idea that, you know, everyone that calls himself a Muslim is either good or either bad is painting with too broad a brush. And, you know, there's too wide of a spectrum of beliefs. Yeah, there are plenty of Muslims who believe in super strict interpretation. They're very fundamentalist and all that shit. There's plenty of those, and there's also plenty of Muslims who are peaceful, average, you know, people that are more like your neighbors than you would realize if you got to know them personally, like on a first name basis, you know. So yeah, you get a little bit of everything with anything, but when you start saying that you're going to keep people out flat out unilaterally based on what religion they claim to be, first of all, that's going to be difficult to enforce. And second of all, it's a violation of their personal freedom. They should be allowed as peaceful individuals to go wherever they want as long as they're peaceful.
Yeah, but I think you're missing the point. Their religion obviously is not peaceful. Are you missing that?
Neither is Christianity.
The thing is, then why don't we see this extreme rising crime? Why don't we see
We do, actually.
No, it's
Hold
not.
on, let me cut
Yeah,
off X.
Totally
Cut off X.
Dick, it's kind of painful when you say that because there's actually like horrific human sex abuse gangs that exist from Islamic immigration all through the UK that are really well known. We've seen like horrific levels of child sex abuse, pedophilia, and human trafficking as a direct result of Islamic immigration all through Europe. This is actually like a known problem. So we have seen increases in crime as a result of Islamic immigration and very horrible crime, human trafficking in particular.
Yeah, and Dex, I know you're going to say, "Oh, but we haven't seen it in the United States," and that's because we haven't reached the concentrations of Islamic immigration where that really ramps into high gear.
Okay, so
Actually,
then
if you look-
if
real
it's
quick,
true
I
that
wanted
way,
to
you know,
add
one second,
something.
one second. Go ahead.
If you look to the St. Paul area of, in
Let's let
Minneapolis,
Edward
is
have
where
a mic
all
turn
these,
here. Sorry, there's a lot of people trying to get on the mic, and I think Edward's the mic.
Yeah. My thing is, right. The Quran has direct, commands to kill anybody who doesn't believe, and the Bible has commands to if they don't believe, you leave them alone. It says depart from them. What's it called? It said if the unbeliever departs, let them depart. 1 Corinthians 1:27. So I know, like they'll see these moral contradictions, like telling them to kill or rape or whoever, and some Muslims won't follow this, right? So like that's like we do know that, and we do see that, and that's a good thing. But if if they were going to be following the Quran like letter for letter, right? There's no commands to do any of those things, to commit those atrocities in the Bible. Like even when you take into account, like when it says to do those things in the Quran, and it's polar opposite to what the Bible says, and then you hear somebody say, "Oh, well, they heard like the Westboro Baptist Church idiots say, oh, God hates gays," and then they say like, oh, they're more like Muslims are more accepting of same-sex marriage or anything. They're not looking at like, one, the Bible doesn't say to hate anybody. It says it actually says if they hate somebody, they're not of God. Like to have any hate in them shows that they're not of God. So they're contradicting themselves, and not even the Bible, because the Bible doesn't say to do any of that. So when there's a direct command in the Quran that says to say any of that,
Yes.
like it's clear.
So
Let me hold on. My case extremely correct. Why do I, Shogun, oppose Islamic immigration? Well, before I came to conspiracy theory server administration of the past server and this server, I was doing a lot of debate with Islam, and I went to the largest Islamic community. This is not like an ISIS community or some like radical community. This is mainstream Orthodox, normal Muslims. And they said that because I had criticized Islam, I was an enemy of God, and therefore the Sharia prescribed the punishment of crucifixion for me. So these Muslims, right, who are not radicals, they're just ordinary Muslims using Discord, literally want to crucify me in my own country. They want to nail me to a board and torture me to death in a public square through crucifixion. Now, if you hear something like that from somebody, they say, we would like to crucify you to death. And then you say, well, you know what? I think you should immigrate to my country and live alongside me. This is just illogical. If these people are saying that they want to impose violence, they want to kill you for drawing the Prophet Muhammad, they have, by far the highest rate of terrorist attacks of any religion. They believe they have martyrdom awaiting them if they kill themselves and kill other people, including citizens. This is not hypothetical. This is a problem all over the world. And it's not even a problem. They do this against each other as well. They do very common terrorist attacks against each other. So if we do not want, suicide bombings and attacks that we see are endemic, and executions and Sharia laws that we see are endemic in Muslim countries, and we don't want to have the rollback of social and human rights that we see in endemic countries where women are not equal, homosexuals are not accepted, where Christians and Jews are oppressed. If we do not want these kind of outcomes, we should not be immigrating people who have these kind of beliefs. And then that's all I have to say.
I absolutely agree with that. And when you look at Muslims in Albania who have a higher human rights score, when you look at Muslims in Bosnia who have a higher human rights score than the U.S., who has more freedom for these certain minorities, you don't see this happening. See, this is why it's a really big problem when we do this, because no, they don't really act on these things. And the thing is, I agree with you. We should never allow someone who tells you that they want to crucify you. But the Muslims I know are a part of the Gay Straight Alliance. The Muslims I know are part of the Black Student Union that I helped make a part, and I want those people to be in my country. So the thing is, you have to you have to select for what specifically they want to do, right? You can't paint this broad of a brush, because we see even Christians. No, 1 second, I'm gonna finish. You even see Christians who believe that like gay marriage should be like legalized, even though they're like Christian. That doesn't. There's just so many problems. We just don't see this happening at all. And the thing is, the difference between Europe and America, why I want to talk about America, is Europe's policy was horrible, right? I'm never for letting in refugees. I think that's a bad thing. The thing is, immigrants, however, are a good thing, especially when they come from Albania and Bosnia, who have a higher human rights.
I'm actually in agreement. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna. Okay, Dex, you're giving one or two examples of a country that you think does it successfully, and your friendly experience, and universalizing that and saying Muslims don't do this, whereas there's dozens of countries that we can give as counter examples that emphasize the general trend. And then I was going to pass the mic off to Drew because he was going to say something.
Well, if I could just build one point quickly off that, there's over 18 countries in the world where homosexuals are routinely put to death for being homosexuals, and every single one of them are Islam, and every single one of them are doing it under Sharia law. So as a homosexual man and someone who supports homosexual men, you should understand that Islam is anti-gay to a violent extent. So you are literally immigrating an anti-gay hate group if you immigrate Islam, and you are immigrating people whose religion commands them to murder you for being gay. This should be a fairly obvious problem.
Hold on. Drew's been trying to get in for a while.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm actually really, this is one of the points where I had to vote in support of the motion that they should be allowed to immigrate, because there's a huge discrepancy between refugee Muslim populations versus immigrants who are allowed through standard processes. I mean, this does seem kind of US and Canada centric in that regard, because the refuge, if you actually polls based upon the attitudes of the refugees versus the ones who immigrate normally through like skills and those kind of things, you're taking the cream of the crop in that regard. And generally speaking, the people you're getting there are the kind of people you want to bring in, which is very different from the kind you get when you do refugees. So if this had been, should we take Muslim refugees in, I would have been like, oh, hell no, hell no. But if it's just a carte blanche, we shouldn't allow any Muslim immigrants. I mean, if you look down into the data, the disparity between refugees and immigrants is huge.
Exactly, and that's why we should, just like you said, a meritocracy. If a Muslim immigrant from Albania or from Bosnia has a PhD and can invigorate my native people's lives, who am I to say no just on this arbitrary standard? What we need to do is exactly. That's exactly what we said. Immigration always vets for this stuff to begin with. I mean, this is why you see no increase in crime in like countries that took immigrants responsibly, such as Minnesota, New York, Texas, California, and my home state, Minnesota. So this is just not true.
I have a question for you. Do you support circumcision, meaning the male genital mutilation of babies without their consent in infancy? Do you support this practice? Do you think there's any moral problem with taking a baby, cutting off and amputating a healthy tissue from its penis?
I don't have the data on that, so I wouldn't be able to make a position now. So I don't.
Well, you should listen to our various past events. I'll tell you something. This is a crime, right? So when you say there's no increase in crime, well, they're not counting circumcision as a crime. However, every Muslim will circumcise his son, and in some case, they also practice female genital mutilation. Now, the circumcision of a child without its consent is a crime. It is a moral crime. It is a sin. It is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of autonomy. It's a violation of consent. It inflicts pain, inflicts harm. Now, this is not being counted as a crime, but if you immigrate Muslims, you are immigrating male genital mutilation, right? You are immigrating Sharia law. You are immigrating domestic abuse. So if you have to ask yourself, do we want to become a Muslim country? If the answer is no, then we should prevent Muslim immigration in order to prevent becoming a Muslim country. And we should admit there are many, many Muslim countries. So if you want to go live under a Sharia law, or if you want to go live under a Quran-based system of justice, you have many, many countries to choose from. Those of us who have created Judeo-Christian or human secularist countries should not allow our countries to become Islamified, because we need to provide an alternative for Muslims who are not satisfied with Muslim life. They should have a place to come and live in a non-Muslim country. And those of us who have thousands of years of resisting Muslims, resisting forced jihad, resisting conversion by the sword, we should not be forced, or we should not accept the willing immigration of people who see themselves explicitly as our enemies and declare war on us. We don't declare war on them, they declare war on us.
We can use this example for literally everything. I can use this secular thing that you're doing. Well, if we live in a secular country, do we want our country to become Christian, or do we want to uphold the values we already have? You could use that. You could literally use that argument to ban any sort of religion. See, my question to you is, why prevent the PhD holder? Why prevent the cream of the crop from benefiting American lives when they don't even hold these beliefs? Because we can see when we responsibly take in as immigrants that they don't commit crimes. We can see countries in which Muslims are 50% of the population. You don't see the Sharia law that you're talking about. You don't see this mass increase of domestic abuse that you're talking about. You don't see homosexuals being killed on the streets. So this is the problem. It's not Muslim that is doing it inherently. It's some other type of variable that we need to sort out.
I mean,
maybe they don't do it because maybe
he asked me. Hold on, he asked me two questions. So first of all, we can take your PhDs, we can take the cream of the crop from non-Muslim cultures, right? There are many creams of the crop. We can take Japanese PhDs, we can take Christian PhDs, we can take secular humanist atheist PhDs, we can take people from Switzerland, we can take people from Germany. It's not like we need to go to the Islamic world to get talented immigrants. In fact, you're going to find a lot more talented, educated immigrants outside of the Islamic world, because they have much lower rates of academic achievement, much lower rates of Nobel Prizes, much lower rates of patents, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're just going on meritocracy, you're not going to be looking at the Islamic world. And second of all, you can find qualified candidates who have PhDs and great job experiences and who aren't Muslim, and therefore don't have an ideology that's counter to our ideology. If I'm running an organization or a family or a house, I'm not going to let people in who have an avowed hatred for my system of government and avowed desire to overthrow it and turn it into a theo-fascist government called Islam. Islam is the bloodiest system of human idea of all time. It's killed over 270 million people and counting. It's created vast genocides and oppression everywhere it's gone. The greatest genocide in history is the Mughal invasion of India. You know, hundreds of millions, created a huge slave trade. You know, Muhammad was a torturer, okay? He was a child trafficker. He had sex with children. He was a slave taker, okay? And this is their role model. So no, it's not illogical to say that we don't want to immigrate people who venerate a pedophile warlord into our country, because that is not going to enrich the culture of our country in the way that we want it to be enriched.
Okay, so a few things. Okay, it's fine that we don't take in Muslim immigrants. However, putting that restriction on them is horrible. You're allowing that PhDs, you're allowing masters in certain fields that we need just to be disqualified, just on the basis that they're Muslim, right? And this country is like literally founded on religious persecution. I mean, it's so hypocritical. It's so laughable. And the thing is, this notion that genocide has went everywhere, that Islam has gone, this is patently false. Look at countries like Albania and Bosnia, again, who have higher human rights scores than the U.S. does.
Hold on,
so
Dex.
No, 1 second. I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna finish, bro. Just let me. You know what? Go ahead. I forgot.
I'm sorry. Are you presuming that just because a Muslim person has a master's degree that they have abandoned their toxic ideologies?
Well, no, I'm saying we can't vet them on the basis that they're Muslim. We need to vet them like he said. He said that there's some people who vow to take down our government and our ideology. Well, yeah, then we wouldn't just be against, like, we would sort out with that, right? So it's not the variable we're looking for is not Muslims, right? Because there's Muslims who have very peaceful societies, even more so than the U.S. We need to search for different variables. It's very dangerous when we start conflating these variables.
When you start bringing up PhDs and doctorates and all this stuff, they literally, they can have all they want from their country, but when they come over here, they still got to prove themselves and pass our curriculum, pass our, like what we teach over here. So it's two different cultures, but they don't even respect the doctor. They can have, he's a regular doctor, he'd be a gynecologist, whatever. He's still gonna have to take tests and do schooling over here to make sure that he can pass the curriculum.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. We should test all of our immigrants on these PhDs if they don't have the same exact standards. I absolutely, I accept that for sure, 100%. But it's just really brash when we're like allowing that, like this meritocracy that he claims to have. I mean, this is clearly not meritocracy, because the thing is, we're not looking for people based on their merits. We're just looking at some broad brush that's painted way too broadly. So the thing is, I believe in strict meritocracy. I think the best of the best, or what we simply need, should be allowed into our country, not some arbitrary.
Seems the best of the best that you think is Bosnia, Chechnya, and what was the other, Albania? Like, come on, man. Those are war zones, man. My cousin was over there for 15, 20 years with the UN, and he's an MP. And the stories he tells me about that area, I can't even tell you the stories. I can't even do it here. Sorry.
They are not war
Albania's
zones. They're absolutely.
no, Albania's actually really bad. I know 2 Albanians, and they tell me all about it. Like, that's one of the reasons why I left, is that it's actually really violent there.
I was gonna say that the reason why
Go
Albanians
ahead.
and stuff aren't getting killed in the streets, maybe it's because they actually follow the law. Like maybe they're really good at following the law.
Well, and I just wanted to say, you said it's not meritocracy. Yes, it is meritocracy. Meritocracy means choosing those who are the most meritocratically qualified. If you're looking at immigration, obviously, ideology is one of the qualifications, right? So yeah, if you're educated, that's great. If you have a good high-paying job, that's great. If you're steadily married, that's great. You got a clean criminal record, that's great. If you're a Muslim, that is a detriment, right? That means you're less meritocratically qualified to immigrate because you subscribe to a doctrine that teaches a whole bunch of things that we consider evil. We have the right to have our moral system, right? We do not support slavery. We're not obligated to support slavery. We do not support domestic abuse. We're not obligated to support domestic abuse. We do not support male genital mutilation. We should not support male genital mutilation. We don't support domestic violence. We don't support adultery, killings. We don't support killing homosexuals. So we have every right, and we have, in fact, a responsibility to protect our country from infiltration by ideas that incompatible with our own. If we want to keep our societies the way they are, where gays don't get thrown off rooftops and women don't get beaten and children don't get married, then we need to not have people immigrate into our countries who are then going to get the vote who believe in these things. This is like really common sense.
But
I thought
Shogun,
the basic role of the government was to protect the people's rights, especially the citizens that are inside of the government. Whenever you're talking about bringing more people inside of the to be citizens that aren't citizens that are immigrating into the U.S., you're literally suggesting that their rights are greater than the people that are already living there. It doesn't make any sense. Why would we be outsourcing our wantings to PhDs in other countries whenever we have fully suited people that are working here? We should be focusing on the people that live here, the citizens that are here, protecting their rights, especially the government in general, than to be, wanting other people to immigrate over.
So massively.
Hold on, let me get in one real quick. With regard to that, and I know Dex, you've already said you don't support the refugee acceptance in Europe, but just the presence in France in particular, right? So and the Quran is 8% of the text is specifically about what to do with Jews. Like it has more anti-Semitism as a percentage of its total text than Mein Kampf does. And as a consequence, 7,000 Jews a year are fleeing France. Women are choosing to dress more conservatively so they don't get harassed. They're reporting that they're not leaving their homes in the same numbers. Like they're having to put public porta potties in place so people aren't pissing in the streets so it doesn't stink. Like the impact on culture there is absolutely tremendous. Now, is the impact on culture less when we vet our immigrants through normal systems? Certainly. But the number of people who are still carrying around backwards toxic ideologies that are threatening to the rights of our minority groups, it's like who are you preferencing here? Like you're going to be the instrument of your own destruction once you've brought in enough people that they start voting in anti-gay rights laws.
Okay, so where are all these anti-gay right laws in Albania and Bosnia? They have a 50% percentage of Muslim people. Why aren't there laws there? And the thing is, like, Why aren't these increased hate crimes in Minnesota, in my home state, which there isn't? Why aren't these increased hate crimes in New York, Texas, Arkansas, California? We have all these states in which we take in these immigrants. There's been no rise in crime levels. So again, we can like speculate. We can be like, but I think, right, these are your feelings. These are not facts of the matter. We need to look at what's actually happening, not what we think is going to happen.
I think it's funny that you're talking about what's actually happening when it's very clear that more than 99% of the hate crimes that go on in this country are fully unreported.
I mean, let me ask you guys this. Wasn't Timothy McVeigh supposedly inspired or, you know, didn't he point to the Bible as his justification for doing what he did?
Well, then you have to look at the text and see, does it actually even say that? Because 90% of the time when it's the Bible, it doesn't. The Quran is very clear in what those things.
That's not my question. I just asked a yes or no question whether or not he pointed to the Bible.
I don't know.
Point.
So,
So,
I don't think so.
what if I
But
pointed to a
please,
science
let
book
me
and
address
said,
something to Dex, please. So Dex, you keep pointing to like Albania or whatever as like an example of that. If you're Muslim, everything's going to be fine. However, the majority, right, there's many different Muslim countries, and you can't just look at the ones that happen to meet your criteria of ones that kind of buck the trend. If you look at the vast majority of Muslim countries, they do follow Sharia law. There's over 18 countries where apostasy is punished by death, where states literally kill you for leaving Islam. They're all Muslim countries. The same countries execute people for being homosexual. If you look at the countries where homosexuals are executed, they're all Muslim countries. So this shows you that Muslim countries, Muslim immigration, the Islamification of countries leads to homosexuals being killed. It leads to child marriages. It leads to all these other negative outcomes. And so it's just obvious that we don't want to subject ourselves to this. And we're not depriving ourselves of anything. We can find PhDs and highly qualified people in a million other countries. We're just saying, let's make our requirement that you can't be sworn to a ideology that makes you our avowed enemy. This isn't like common sense.
I just gotta say, hold on, I gotta say real quick, dude, Dex, I gotta say real quick, Albania does not recognize same-sex couples. Albania does not recognize same-sex couples. I'm reading right here. Considered to be rather conservative, especially in public reactions regarding LGBT issues. However, anti-discrimination legislation have made ILGA Europe regard Albania as one of very few countries in Europe which explicitly bans discrimination on gender identity. So they're obeying like a European law, but their culture is still very anti-LGBT.
Okay,
Lost
so
the
then
Craig bot.
I mean,
Yes, hold on. We lost the Craig bot, guys. I can resum it if you want, Shogun, but we're still gonna have it on sites.
But everybody vote on the debate, and then we'll close this event, and we'll just record whatever we got there.
Sure thing. So, I do want to hit on these points. Okay, so the reason why I'm looking at these two countries is because you see, with every single Muslim country, the amount of human rights always goes up with the GDP. It always goes up with economic success. And you can even see this in Christian countries of the past. We had slavery. America, the UK, Germany, these were dominated Christians, right? But they had slavery, right? So morals just advance naturally among an economic timeline. They naturally advance as soon as you're able to get resources more successfully, as soon as our people are more better off. So it's very fallacious when we're comparing like places in which people like some of like the highest wealth disparities where people are very poor to like a country that's, you know, very rich, because America had slavery during it was a Christian majority. Does that mean all Christians are bad?
This is
Absolutely
completely
not. I'm gonna
false.
finish really quick. What do you mean? How is this completely false?
Well,
I
you said
have the
you're going
source.
to
You
finish,
can
so
check
when
out
you're
the
done,
source.
I'll respond to you.
Well, the thing is, it's not completely false. The source is source 17. You can go through that. You can compare GDP to human rights. So no, it is not false. It is true.
So Islam has a lot of really toxic and horrible ideas, like beating your wife, killing homosexuals, etc. This is why it's not good to immigrate, right? I've said this. You're saying this is a result of poverty. No, this is a result of them believing their own religion. Richest countries in the world, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, are the strictest exporters of Wahhabi brand Islam. They behead people in the public square every year for homosexuality, for sorcery. They stone people to death. These are the richest countries in the world. Okay, so this is not a product of poverty. This is a problem of Islam.
But places like those, wealth is very concentrated, right? It's not like America where like everyone is typically doing well. It's very concentrated.
That's not
So
true
that's
either.
no, that is absolutely true. I can pull stuff.
Average American has less than $500 in the bank and $100,000 in debt. They're living paycheck to paycheck and can cover a basic emergency. They're not doing that well.
I wanted to respond to Ralph real quick. Like, if I use a science book and I justified saying like, oh, since it says I'm a monkey or I came from a monkey, I want to be able to throw poop in public, throw poop at people because that's what monkeys do. And if I'm just a monkey, I can be able to do that, right? But like, you would look at the science book, it's just like, why? Like, you it sounds like you just want to throw poop at people, and you're using this as some weird justification. So it's like, you got to look at the content of what's actually there instead of saying like, like if somebody says, oh, I did this because of this book or whatever, right? And then you immediately take what they say and already judge what they are saying as like, fact, because if they were already going to do something deranged, the content of their mind should already be in question, and then you should question whatever else they're basing their beliefs off of. So it's like, if they say that slavery is allowed by the Bible when it's not, it's just clear that they want to have slaves, they want to be like power play over people, and just need literally they get the little tiniest bit of justification, even when it's not even actually justifying it, and they'll run with that. So that's what you have with Islam as well, because some people that follow certain like actual laws, because there are some people like practicing Muslims who don't follow the Quran because they see moral contradictions with them telling them to commit just heinous things, and they just don't do it because they see that it's a moral contradiction.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Me, Dex, or Shogun?
Shogun. If he's still
You
around.
can automatically ask the question. Go ahead.
Okay. You said earlier you were one of your oppositions to Islam specifically was the practice of genital mutilation, circumcision, both male and female. And then you, as a reason why you wouldn't want them brought here, they would bring that practice. And then you described the United States as like a Judeo-Christian culture. But I mean, male circumcision, that comes from Judaism in large part. And why would that then, if you have such problems with that, why would you not have any kind of problems with the Jewish immigration or that kind of thing? I'm just wondering.
Well, I believe that male genital mutilation and female genital mutilation are crimes, right? I don't care if the government doesn't define them as crimes. They are crimes. They're moral crimes of very serious nature. So whatever your religious reason for practicing male genital mutilation or female genital mutilation, I strongly demand that this be considered a crime, and any parent who subjects their child to this needs to be going to prison. Any doctor who does this for non-medical reason needs to be losing their license, regardless if you're Jewish or Muslim. But that being said, the United States is actually an exception. Most of the world does not practice circumcision. The United States, for reasons we won't get into right now, actually tends to practice it. The rest of the world really doesn't. But the point is, these practices, FGM and MGM, are unacceptable regardless of why. But if you have a group of people like the Muslims that are 100% committed to doing it, if you bring in 100 Muslims, you're bringing in 100 circumcisions. If you bring in 1,000, you're bringing in 1,000 circumcisions. So each new Muslim that you bring in is another mutilated child. And this is a good reason not to do this.
I guess a follow-up question for Dex. You were talking about how bringing in people, you wanted to have a meritocracy in bringing in people. If there were a selection process that didn't ask specifically about whether you're a Muslim, but asked like what's your attitude towards gay people and homosexuality, would you see that as not just totally fine for a proxy for allowing people to immigrate?
Yeah, that's completely fine. Like that's what I'm advocating for, right? So we need to go deeper with our regulations. We can't just have this broad brush. So yeah, that is absolutely what I'm advocating for here. We need to like go specifically on like these beliefs for sure. And by the way, do we want to get the Craigbot in here and like wrap it up? Or
it sounds to me like both of you are basically saying you have different value sets and you just want people to come in based on your value sets, and you don't want people who don't agree with you to come in. So
hold on. Sorry. Dex said he wants the Craigbot back. So if someone wants to summon the Craigbot, please go ahead and do so.
Oh no, I was just asking if we needed that to wrap it up because I don't know. We can do whatever.
Yeah. If someone can summon it, please do.
Hello. There
One
are
person
still
is
a number
suggesting
of seats
that it's
down
for
in
the
front.
betterment of
This
the
is what was-
country, and the other is suggesting
Now
it's for the
recording.
betterment of the country.
I'm just saying in our immigration, we have the right to immigrate people based on what serves our interests as a country. And obviously we want, yes, qualified people. We want educated people. We want law-abiding people, people with clean criminal records, people that are intelligent, that come with families, et cetera, et cetera. We want all those standards, and we want them to have an ideology that's compatible with our values. Islam is an ideology that's incompatible with our values. Therefore, we can just choose qualified people who have degrees and who have all these other qualifications and have money from other groups that do not have a principle of unending war until all religion is for fucking Allah. So it's just silly. It's like, if you have a job interview, are you looking at the guy's education? Yes. Are you looking at his qualifications? Yes. If he's part of a group like a neo-Nazi group or some kind of hate group or Islam, all of these are disqualifying factors. They imply serious problems, and therefore that we have every legitimate reason to say, no, I'm sorry, we're looking for qualified people who don't believe in Sharia law. You believe in the Quran, you believe in Sharia law, therefore we're disqualifying you because we're not trying to have Sharia law in our country. And bringing in people who believe in Sharia law and giving them a vote is a good way to ensure that we slowly Islamicize our country. And this is unwise, and it's against our interests, and nobody has any right to tell us to do things that are against our interests.
This is actually undebatable. Actually, Shogun just said you can't even debate. So it's funny that Dex even tried to put up a debate against that, but you can't even debate what Shogun just said. I'm sorry.
All right, I'd like to elaborate.
Okay, so
Here's the thing.
Since I was
one at a time.
No, I had the mic. Here's the thing. Like, even if you accept only highly qualified, somewhat secular Muslims, who are, I don't know, doctors and lawyers and things, right? And you increase their population, they're still going to be raising their kids according to this book, and the extremism can always arise, and you're creating a potentially high risk subpopulation in your country, whereas there is no shortage of qualified people in the world to bring in. So you would be choosing a higher risk option without really any increase in the reward. I don't see why this is a good gamble for the people who are already citizens here.
Because it's not a gamble. I mean, I do want to address, because 3 things were addressed towards me. So it's not a gamble, though. That's the thing. We can look at these states in which this happened. Did the crime rates rise? No. Did any type of crime rise? No. So it didn't happen. This is not a gamble. We've already No, the thing is, we already hypothetically.
There's been huge sex trafficking.
Can I please? Again, I would like to point out that we're talking about immigration policy, not refugee policy. There is a distinction between the two, and I would like to talk about immigration while not going on to a topic that we are not debating. Now, the thing is, this is not a gamble, right? Even if it was a gamble, we already took it, right? So we already saw what happened, and nothing happened. The thing is, like, it's just. It's just like the thing is, like, really, we can go on and on.
The difference.
You missed my entire point, man. My entire point was. I'm sorry, you missed my entire point. My entire point was you can bring in people that meet all of your qualifications. You can observe that there's no problem in the 20-year, 30-year period that you're having it. They can have kids. Then the 10, 15, 20% Muslim population you've created could go through some kind of reformation and start forming extremist groups again. Like, this could happen at any point down the future if you create this subpopulation.
Hold on. Can I please get a word in, Dex? Sorry. You live in a country where people have freedom of religion already. People convert to Islam within the United States and Canada and all these other nations. So it's not like you can keep people from joining Islam. In fact, as many people convert to Islam as convert away from it in the United States. So it doesn't really stand that you're going to prevent a Muslim stronghold or a foothold from taking hold when one already has. So if that's your argument, it's too late.
What we're talking about is bringing in more. Okay, bro.
It's about immigration.
So thanks, man. So the thing is, we've already seen what their kids are like, and they're more for human rights than their parents are, and even the general population is. I mean, if you look at second wave immigrants and second wave Muslim immigrants, they're one of like the demographics who are most accepting of homosexuals. When you look at third generation Muslims, they're one of the demographics who are most accepting of homosexuals, even more so than Christians. So if anything, we should be Christian immigration, dude.
You just
can't-
destroyed your own argument. You just destroyed your own argument with that justification. What we're talking about is the immigration. We're talking about justification for immigration. You're literally just destroying your own argument by saying once they live here and they've been here for long enough to make kids, their ideology instantly changes. The point of the argument that Shogun is making is their ideology is already flawed. That's the point that they're making. Your whole basis of your argument is based on policy in different countries where the ideology is completely accepted by the whole civilization. It doesn't make any sense what you're saying. It's not accepted by the people that live here.
It totally does, because if they believe if they're like conservative Muslims and then they come here and then they stop being conservative Muslims, or their kids become like nominal Muslims who are like Muslim in name only, in the same way that there are a lot of nominal Christians and nominal Jews and so on and so forth who claim to be of that faith but don't really take it too seriously, then he's making a completely valid point.
No, he's not. The point of the argument is based on immigration. That's the whole point.
He's
you
saying
haven't been following the conversation at all. See, this is how you just.
No, we're talking about the point that you just made.
The point was
So we were talking. Sir Snar was bringing up this whole point in which, well, you know, they could be like some like radicalization. They could all just radicalize instantly, magically, like just whatever. But the thing is, this has just not been the case. And actually, Muslim immigrants are more accepting of homosexuality than evangelical Christians that we have. So no, again, this is still evidence to my point.
Okay, so Dex's claim that nothing happened as a result of Muslim immigration in the United States is simply untenable, because we've seen a steady upward trend of the increase in the Muslim population in the last 10 years, but we've seen a steady decrease in the overall crimes in the last like many years. But still, the Muslim population is only about 1.1% of the total U.S. population, and so there's no way.
I got to go for the time being. I wanted to thank Dex for the debate. That was enjoyable, and anyone who hasn't voted yet, just go to Rec and vote on the channels. Continue discussion, but I got to go for the time being. I'll be back soon. Thanks, Dex.
Thank you, Shogun, for the debate. It's been a
later, buddy.
So there's no actual way to compare and contrast, like how much crime that the Muslims have been contributing compared to it's like, 'cause I don't think that when they're recording the crime statistics that they list, oh, a Muslim committed this crime, and
they do.
And the
it's tough because you can't separate out Muslim immigrants from Muslim refugees, because we have been accepting Muslim refugees, and the Muslim refugees, if you look at the data, the areas that they go into do have increased crime rates, the Muslim refugees. And Dix is saying, well, yeah, but the refugee problem, the ones you take in from the refugee as refugees, those are not the cream of the crop. Those tend to be the ones you don't want to bring in. But with an immigration policy similar to like what we have in India, I'm not to bring race and IQ and anything like into this, but like the average IQ of a person from India is far lower than that in the U.S. But the average IQ of the Indian immigrant, the ones we actually bring over here, is a standard deviation higher. So we are definitely bringing over the cream of the crop there, and we're getting like the ones who really benefit our society. And he's saying if you had an immigration policy like that with Muslim nations, where you didn't bring in refugees, but you had a meritocratic immigration policy, and you didn't just exclude people because they're Muslim, when we brought in those people, it would be good for us.
Okay, and then to finish my point, though, that Muslims, their strategy is to initially come in peacefully and abide by the laws and lie in every way possible to make their belief system look good in the eyes of the foreigners. And they have a specific practice on lying about what it is that they believe. And then once they build up their numbers within the nation, they take it over from within. And they've been doing this for centuries. And it's like the evidence is overwhelming on this. It's like, you mentioned Albania, that they did this in Albania. Like the reason Albania is 50% Muslim is because the Ottoman Empire conquested it, and then 200 years later, they converted to Islam in large numbers.
The arguments you're saying there could just as easily, those same arguments have been leveled against the Jews for quite some time. So I just, it seems so weird to me to hear these arguments that if these were brought up against like Jewish people would just be aghast. But brought up against Islam and Muslims, and it's just like accepted as fact. And I'm not saying that maybe we should bring it up in both situations, but it just seems kind of hypocritical to me.
Yeah.
I think it's been pointed out numerous times in this discussion that that's like simply not the same thing, because Muslims have been responsible for what, like 270 million deaths. It's just like you just don't have this warlord mentality with the Jews. Like it's not this like it's not.
Okay, Shogun brought up Rotherham, right? And there was like 1,400 girls, or 1,400 charges, I believe. Actually, no, 1,400 girls that were actually molested, right? But this is the thing, like some of the guys that perpetrated it, like these types of crimes, the ringleaders and stuff, have been in the UK for up to like 40 years. And this stuff's all been shoved under the carpet for 40 years. And now this is all just coming to light. So they're not changing. It's an absolute fact that they are not changing. They are not immigrating properly.
So this is just simply not true. Again, I have if you want to go through sources, I have source 1 through 8 looks at this, as well as 12 to 15, as well as 17. So this all proves you wrong. No, they do absolutely immigrate. 93% of them are proud of being American. You see no rise in these crime rates. And again, we need to make a distinction within policy. No one is advocating here for the refugees to come in. We're talking about immigration. The problems that are coming, that are arising, is from refugees again. So you have to be careful. We're not talking about refugees. We're not talking about the policies that the European Union did like hastily and horribly, right? We're talking about the policies in which we let immigrants, we let the cream of the crop come into our country and benefit ourselves.
That just go right over top of your head. I was talking about Rotherham, UK. All right. You can look it up. 1,400 girls molested. All right. Some of these girls are now coming forward 20 some years later, 25 years later, and they were molested and trafficked through these like areas. They're literally no-go zones now for the regular person from England or Scotland or whatever. They're literally forced out of their own friggin' cities, places where they grew up, boroughs where they grew up, where their grandparents grew up, their parents grew up, and they were growing up, and now they're forced out.
Again, this is a difference between policy. The London and all of the European Union countries allowed in refugees. I'm not advocating for that. So again, this is a difference between policy. And we can see in the states that have the most amount of Muslim immigrants within them, we don't see these rape gangs. We don't see rise in crime rates. So this is just not something that we do see when you have responsible policy.
Dex, you can't choose to include all Muslims in certain polls and then pick out, oh, well, this is just for immigrants and not refugees when it's inconvenient. That doesn't work. I mean, I even though I agree with you conceptually, I'm in agreement with your position. You can't combine them and then separate them as is convenient for your argument, because that will not.
These polls look at Muslim immigrants. They specifically target out Muslim immigrants. So no, these polls, I did do my due diligence and I did look for polls. I mean, you can go through a few links. They do separate between the immigrants, those born abroad, and those who came here, and those who were just here. So yes, it does clarify.
Polls are biased, dude. Polls are biased all the time.
I mean, I just posted a link to, I know it's the Religion of Peace, and it picks and chooses polls that make Muslims look it's not exactly pro-Muslim, okay, but that can give you a whole long list of opinion polls of Muslims that do not reflect upon them favorably. We can pick and choose polls. Polls are like, they're the weakest form of stats. They're like, they're almost worse than anecdotal, because at least anecdotal stuff is based on a real world event we can discuss.
Yeah, like here in Canada last year, they busted a child sex trafficking ring. Actually, I don't even think it was a child one. This was an adult trafficking ring. And I think there were like 53 names named, and 48 of them literally were Muslim.
Sorry, that was my little sister. But I mean, we can say this, right? But it's like it's so much. Like I can use anecdotes right now. I mean, some of my Muslim friends are like one of the leaders in GSA, which is the Gay Straight Alliance. I mean, this is literally like a club in our high school that advocates for gay people. I can say, well, look, this Muslim does it, so therefore all of them do it. No, that's not how we. This is why anecdote is horrible, right? So you need to look at what happens overall. You need to look at what happens more broadly.
And both you and Shogun did this, where Shogun kind of assumed that everyone would agree with his social positions, and you assumed that everyone would agree with your social positions as proxies for what a good Muslim would be, or a good immigrant would be, or a good, kind of thing. And I might not agree with both of you on these things. I might not agree with Shogun on genital mutilation. I might not agree with you on gay rights. And what's wrong with that?
No one's saying that's nothing wrong with that. However, so we both accepted that meritocracy, would be a good thing just for the sake of debate, right? So this could could totally turn into an immigration debate. However, given that immigration is good, right? Should we just restrict Muslims? And I would love to have a debate with you on immigration if you ever.
My point was that you were not opposed to some kind of ideological filter. You were fine as long as it was an ideological filter that reflected your values more specifically, that didn't exclude Muslims simply because of their religious views, because that's not something you saw as disqualifying. So it's not like you were taking this principled stance that we shouldn't say, hey, you don't believe what the majority believes, that means we aren't going to take you. You just had a different conception of the kind of moral litmus test you would want before allowing someone in. And so in that regard, I mean, even though on the question asked, I agree with you, from both of you, I found it very unconvincing, because it's basically both of you are like, we want a moralistic immigration policy, but it should be my views and my position that is made manifest in that,
I agree with Shogun's assertions about, genital mutilation and circumcision being about the same thing. I pretty much agree with him about that. But the way he used it in this argument, I thought was not a good argument at all, because you've got plenty of Jews and Christians in America, as was being brought up earlier, that are perfectly fine with it. So to use that against Muslims, but to not hold Christians and Jews by the same standard that you want to hold against Muslims, that just shows that you're just looking for you're grabbing for any straw you can. You're not actually, it's not a good argument.
Well, all he has to do is say that's not true, and then move on to some other point, some poll, or just some height, he'll just select something that makes his point appear to be true. That's extremely unrepresentative of the whole circumstance, and then he'll move on.
I don't know if you were following the conversation, but we had two distinct, different arguments. Right? He was saying, "Look, it's written in the book." I'm looking at, "Look, they don't really act like that." So no, we had two different arguments.
Honestly, I wish Shogun had brought in more data and examples, and I wish that you had made arguments with yours rather than just kind of dumping them and asserting them without necessarily connecting the dots of what the point you're trying to make. I felt like
if you look on a world map that highlights the current conflicts, if I recall correctly, something like 70+% of all current conflicts involve Muslims on one side or the other.
Okay, but that's also more Middle Eastern conflicts and that area, which, I mean, we look at Indonesia, which is heavily Muslim, majority Muslim country, and it's not having conflicts. And so there could be something distinct about that region, which is less to do with Islam, the faith, and more to do with just that region and its conflict, and with what happened at the breakup of the Ottoman Empire and the establishment of Israel, and how it's kind of been it's the same kind of artificial boundaries that were created in colonialism, but applied to an area which is also ethnically very divided.
So, what would it take to really change your mind, Dex? What would you need to see in order for you to embrace discrimination against violent extremists?
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't take me any evidence to go against violent extremists because they're violent and extremists. But however, on this immigration debate, if it was the case that even like immigrants, and it was inherently a Muslim thing, so it wasn't, it was every single Muslim immigrant was like doing this, then yeah, I would totally be against this. Like if there was no other confounding variables that we could look at that would get rid of these like crime rates, that would get rid of this increased crime, get rid of rather like increase welfare usage, I'd be against it. However, you can get rid of those like using other confounding variables, and we should regulate it using these variables.
Yeah, but we showed you exactly what their ideology is, and it's like anybody who actually believes in that ideology is a violent extremist. And so I'll ask the question again: what would it take to change you to change your mind and accept discriminating against violent extremists?
I don't know if I cut out my mic, but I already answered this question. But yeah, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them for sure.
Address. Someone said something about. Sorry, someone said something about in the UK they have no-go zones for like Muslims. Just Muslims are allowed there. From my experience, that came from a time when it wasn't no-go neighborhoods. There was a 2 or 3, I think, Muslim groups that were going around neighborhoods and like threatening people, and they have been arrested. But a lot of British people think there are no-go areas, but because a lot of British people are against immigration, I mean, or especially refugees. I'm not. I'm on Dex's kind of side, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify that a little.
Yeah, the actual no-go zones are actually in the EU. I can put a finger on the countries later on, but yeah, but the Sharia law police or whatever they were going around friggin' enforcing, making people dump out their beers and stuff like that. Yeah, telling women can't walk around their neighborhood wearing skirts and stuff like that. Yeah, do you know anything about the Rotherham cases?
No.
The 1,400 girls that were molested over 40 years, and it was all swept under the rug.
No, I don't know. I don't know about it. Was that in the UK?
Yeah, that Rotherham. It's outside England.
Yeah, I know. All right, let me have a look.
London, I mean.
Christina, where are you from?
From England. All over England. My father was Royal Air Force, so let's see. Here we go. Rotherham child sexual exploitation scandal. It is a big scandal in England, that's for sure.
And that's one city. That's just one city, and all these people have been there for like over 40 years. Well, not all of them, but like some of the oldest ones that were there doing that stuff, they've been involved for over 40 years and have lived in the UK for like 40 years. So and they immigrated too, Dex. Or did Dex
Sweden has a really bad issue with Islam.
This is like the Minority Report, because it's like we're not going to judge people based on their own individual actions. We're going to judge them for the pre-crime that we think they might commit because they say that they're of this belief or another belief. If someone is not individually physically threatening anybody, if there's no imminent threat, then they haven't committed a crime.
Future crime.
All right, but I'd like to ask this, right? Like, so people who are in favor of Islamic immigration, I would say, okay, imagine that Austria or Romania or something, their culture changed so much that like 40% of their population became neo-Nazis. Would you want to have any legislation that adjusted the Austrian immigration policy, or would you just be like, all right, well, that would be pre-crime. You know, we can't like prejudge neo-Nazis.
I'm for open immigration, so you treat each individual as an individual, and you judge them by their own personal actions, and nothing else is a substitute for that.
Yeah, and if these neo-Nazis didn't hold like real neo-Nazis beliefs, if these neo-Nazis were actually more Jewish people than the native population, if these neo-Nazis, like if Austria adopted no neo-Nazi policies, yet we were all claiming they're neo-Nazis, then yeah. I mean, if they're not like being neo-Nazi, then yeah, sure.
What?
Like, so this is what I'm trying to do, right? So we're saying like, oh, Muslim in the book, you know, they're gonna kill people and they're gonna do all this, but this doesn't happen, right? So if we had these neo-Nazi like immigration and none of like no violence was coming from them, no increase in hate crimes, like they weren't voting for neo-Nazi like senators or whatever, then sure.
You hear how bad the country is right now? They literally lost track of 34,700 immigrants, economic immigrants that came across the border, and they literally don't know where they are now. 37,000 or 34,000, I mean.
Well, the fact that they're that incompetent at keeping track of people should be all the more reason to make sure that when they are involved with people's lives and screwing them up or making them better, that they're only looking at people as individuals. Because when you start painting with these broad brushes, then these incompetent people in government are bound to fuck people over who don't deserve to be fucked over. And it's going to be based on some bullshit that somebody is looking under their fucking bed. That's what this sounds like to me, is a bunch of people looking under their fucking bed for somebody with a towel on their head. And you know, I expect better of my fellow man.
Well, you know what? Like the Hindu population over here in Canada are awesome. They are awesome fucking people. Like there's literally a biker group, and they fought the Supreme Court stating that they shouldn't have to wear helmets because of their religious garb, right? And like this group is a couple thousand bike loving Hindus. You don't have to ride a scooter anymore. They can buy a big fucking Harley or a Goldwing or whatever they want.
And before we do have the next event, I think we should probably announce the results or whatever. But we, of course, we can continue the conversation. So, who won the debate? It was an absolute blowout. Shogun got 9 votes. I got 5. It was almost doubles. Definitely Shogun won. Now, did this debate change your mind? 2 people answered yes, while 11 people answered no. We're very stuck to our beliefs. Now, should Muslim immigration be allowed? 9 people said no. 4 people said yes, and 1 person said, I need more information on this topic. So overall, Shogun absolutely did out.
Like I said earlier, I really wish Shogun had brought more examples to what he was saying rather than just asserting things. And though you brought in a lot of information, it wasn't really explained. It was just like, here's this stat, and I didn't really know what it was from or what it necessarily showed when you claimed it up. So you need to work your. My advice is work your. Don't just have the stats ready. Connect the stats to an argument, so you have the argument ready to go with the stat. And again, if Shogun, well, he's deaf, so we can't hear, but I would say that he should have things to back up his claims, because if either both of you had done those, it would have been a much better debate, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you so much for the criticism. I'll absolutely take that to next debate, Shirley. Any other broad things that either of us could improve on, just from the audience's point of view?
Yeah, instead of grabbing all those little whatever you uploaded there, and breaking them down, that's awesome for us to go back through. But grab a couple of the hard, like the concrete ones, and go through those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
streamline your attack.
Yeah, I totally failed in that regard, because I just, I didn't really explain what it meant. I listed it out, and I assumed that people would be able to understand it from view, but I can't assume that. I need to demonstrate how this side does.
In formal debate, it's about how many points you can get off in rapid succession, but in actual, you're trying to convince people debate, it's about, making each point as strong as possible. And so if you have, so if there was an argument where you had 2 different stats which backed up that argument, saying, actually, this is the case, blah, 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 and the way we know this is because this stat, and then you've connected that stat to the argument, and then it gives, then you've made your point.
Yeah, I'm writing that.